here we are. My name is Christopher Seeley for Good Food Revolution, collaborator at large, and Broad Strokes is this 15-20 minute segment where we paint picture with the human factors in wine culture, more or less short Zoom interviews. And here we have Bruno Almeida, sommelier, wine educator out of New York, who I've been kind of recently connected with in the last first lockdown through some virtual tastings and seen his progress and movements through social media and Instagram. And I thought it'd be great to get him on the call and give us some insight into who he is and what he's doing. So could you tell us about yourself, please? Yes, and thank you for participating and being here. I feel like you're a brother.
I'm
Yeah.
deeply honored. Thank you so much for reaching out to me. And this is what we all learned about during these challenging times. It's this way of connecting that I take it as a positive out of the big challenges we've been coming across in the past few months. So my name is Bruno Almeida. I was born and raised in Portugal. My parents are African. They were born in Mozambique and Saint Tomé and Prince. And I grew up in Lisbon. Was born and raised in Lisbon. I came to the US in 2002, landed in 2002 as a musician. That's why I go under the name of Sommelier in social media, drummer and a sommelier. I've never been, I have no background in wine in Portugal, like despite like living in Brussels, which is very close, you know, that feeling,
Yeah.
which is very close. It's a tiny sub-region close to, in Lisbon. When you're landing in the airport, you're basically seeing vineyards all over the place, and this is one of them. So I was living about 20 minutes away from Lisbon, but I had a connection with the campsite, like with with the countryside, let's say it, with the countryside. My mom decided, my parents divorced when I was 10, and they decided, well, let's get out of the city. She was a painter. She loved like painting and listen to Chopin nocturnos and to Janis Joplin and to Jimi Hendrix and to Supertramp and Pink Floyd. So we need to go to the countryside, and I want to paint the countryside. So that's we kind of did. We moved away like 20 minutes away, which in Portugal it's fairly enough like to be like far away from the big cities.
Right.
So I started to have a connection with the countryside, but not necessarily with vines. And I would spend like some summers in Portugal and in Europe. They can go like to 4 months during the summertime for school break. So I would spend like 1 month here, or like 2 weeks over there with some friends or someone in the family. Then I came across with some harvest. I came across as a young kid just watching like, what is that? Like, and I came across like I did stomp some grapes like close to Douro and in the down, like some family, like I did that, like drank like the juice out of the cup, like when they were stomping the grapes. Like I was looking at that looks dirty, that looks nasty as a kid, watching them like with their shorts and like singing back and forth, stomping the grapes. So like that was basically like my connection to wine when I was in Portugal. And despite being in Brussels, being close to wine country, it was not necessarily like in the 90s. Portugal was still not necessarily like we were not drinking as much wine as we are right now in terms of even of diversity. We weren't, like my generation wasn't. Like with time, we start like drinking more wine, like in the 2000s, I would say. But in the 90s, my generation was not huge in wine. We were big in beer. We would drink a lot of beer. Whenever I would drink some wine, it would be a white wine, like from Marinto, from Brussels, because I was living close by. I would have that connection.
Yeah.
But if I would drink a red, would be reds that normally I won't drink now. Like would be like the juiciest style of the reds that were more exposed, like coming from Alentejo, coming from the Douro, that was a little bit of the style that was going on during that time. And then once I landed in, I had, so I was a musician, I was a drummer during all that time, all these bands, and then I was approached by a band like, hey, we have this thing going on. We have a project to work with Sony at the time. Let's go to New York and let's try it. Let's give it a shot. And that was 2001. And then we all know what happened in 2001. Yeah. So we had to postpone. We came in 2002. came in 2002, like first month, 3 months, 4 months, and then like, oh man, my money's gone. So I had to start working in restaurants and start working in hospitality, like 2 shifts, 3 shifts, like mopping floors, like taking takeout orders, like in the morning, and like hit the studio later at night and stuff like that. And that's how I started. And later on, like I started like to take it more seriously, like mainly in Portuguese, Spanish restaurants in the city in like 2003. And then from that point, never stopped. And that's how I kickstarted my journey in wine and in hospitality. But it was just interesting, like to start working in restaurants, were totally different from the approach that I had in Portugal in terms of wine, mainly like working in Italian restaurants, like being introduced to Nebbiolo, being introduced to Suave, like what was a Valpolicella, like that's what a little bit like, wine can be like this, wine can be like that. I was a young kid, so
Yeah.
and that's how things started for me in New York.
Amazing. It's nice because it adds a fresh perspective that not everyone sees or has the opportunity to do, or maybe we do, and it's not always highlighted. Because I myself didn't have a background in wine when I came into the industry. I was a French language major. I had taken off to live in Paris, to immerse myself, maybe in a way not unlike your trip to New York, where I took some cameras, took some records. I thought I would do some things. 27 at the time. I'm 45 now. So the idea there was not to bounce around, but just immerse and live there. And I got curious about industry because there was things that were relatable to my culture and growing up in a Caribbean household, that I found, like in terms of going to the cheese boutique, cheese shop, or bar, having picnics, or just socializing with friends, and communication was through wine and food and cheese. And when I came back, I was like, oh, what is this? Can I get deeper into wine? And then I started to study and get into the restaurants again, just busser to food runner. And then, why aren't they taking care of the wines over there and the coffee machine? And all of a sudden, they're like, okay, you take care of it. And there we go. And that was 2005. So it sounds like we're in the interesting similar trajectory. So we're here now on the screen. I think in terms of your accomplishments in your world, can you tell us? Um, eh, Actually, let's backtrack and jump to this question: is that because of and as a result of everything that's happened in North America, in the world, more or less the racial reckoning that's happened in the U.S. and by influence what's happening in Canada, to a different degree. Social media has been like this really interesting connector where myself, who's kind of lived, wouldn't say isolated, but isolated from a large majority of sommeliers who look and speak like me or think like me. I've been able to track and see everyone's trajectory over the last year or so. And so from my humblest perspective, I'm seeing new opportunities. I'm seeing you doing a whole bunch of new things, and others like yourself. Can you tell us about your recent trip? And has there been a change in the industry, or your perspective, or has there been any real change? And I think prior to getting on the recording of the call, I think you were saying you were in the process of change. Was that as a result of, was that happening before the racial reckoning, or is there a significant shift? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, yeah.
Like my again, like as I said before, like I've been in hospitality, like started basically when I landed, but it took me a long time, like either to get myself in the position that that I am right now. It was not easy. So what's happening right now, like with people like sitting down and really realizing that we need to rethink either the world of wine, or like how we express ourselves and how we accept diversity and how we accept more melanated voices. Wine industry took a long time.
Yes.
It took a long time. So either went from, when I started like mainly like being big on wine and like seeing like that was something that I wanted to do, was about 2006. That's when I started like really like, okay, I want to be like more focused on wine in my career, like more like in what I do. And then by 2008, I was a wine director in the West Village, in this Italian restaurant called Gusto, and took a long time, like for people to understand, like, oh man, it's a black dude, like, you know, like in a suit, like teaching us about wine
I
from
was
Emilia Romagna to Sicily. Like,
so
what the
I'll tell
heck,
you,
you
I was
know?
working for an Italian restaurant in the same period, a restaurant called Mercato, and then a
Okay.
restaurant called Toroni. So yes, I understand you coming
And, you
in.
know,
You're just a student. You're just coming at it
exactly.
like, oh, this is
Mhm.
amazing, and then the response is different. It's sort of like, where are you from?
Exactly. You have an accent, you
You
know,
have
and
an
stuff
accent.
like this.
Like exactly, where are you from? And I'm like, well, I'm
Yeah.
here doing this wine thing, and then it becomes more than just you
Mhm.
being a wine professional, and that's the other layer that, yeah. So continue. That's a really interesting step that you've been
You
taking.
know, like it was like in 2008, my kid was born, so a lot of things were happening. Like I decided, like, okay, this is like, you know, this is the turn that I want to do with my life. I want to keep it getting more serious. I was like studying like crazy. I was just reading books and books and books. I have like my bookshelf. It's all about wine books. Like my kid looks at it like, what the heck are you doing? Why spending all this money? Like I doing this like in I transformed my office to a wine cellar because it was just I'm being fortunate with life in terms of wine, in terms of I have a great relationship with the companies that I work in the places that I worked. So there was a time I live in New Jersey, actually live 15 minutes away from the city,
Mm,
which allow me, like, there's a lot of great places in New Jersey that I can buy like a lot of stuff that people don't know, like, oh,
right.
that price, oh, I'll buy it. I'll buy it, I'll buy that. So but it was a huge journey. It was a huge moment that we think of that was only like 13 years ago, but it was like long 13 years that when I took things more seriously in my journey in wine, that was basically like it, like around 2008. Like I started like going to tastings in 2005, and people look at you like nowadays we take it for granted, but I would go to a tasting, like a portfolio tasting, and I would be like going kind of early, or I'd be like one of the first, let's say, and I would go to to a table, and easily I could tell, like, can you come back like later on when I have more wines open? Like I could feel like if I was someone else, perhaps I would start drinking those wines instead of like opening the wines for me. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah, yeah.
I remember having that feeling that I people could tell I was novice, like I could be like someone new into wine, that not necessarily would spend time talking about the wine. But if I was someone different, perhaps they would spend more time explaining the wine. But this was like, 15 years ago, like, and we think like, oh, but nowadays things are really different. But I got that feeling a lot of times when I started like going in my journey into wine, and even tasting, like, and going to with friends that were working in Italian restaurants who were explaining like, oh, this is how Pinot Grigio tastes like, like, okay, this is what Suave tastes like, like, yeah, like Trebbiano is like this, Verdicchio is like that, like, I was like working in Portuguese restaurants, but I needed to express how Portuguese wines would resemble like to a Barolo, or trying to understand what Bordeaux was when I have a Toriga blend or I have a Douro wine, because I'm working in a Portuguese restaurant. How can I? So I started like by tasting other
Make,
wines, not necessarily Portuguese wines.
making the
So I
connection.
started from scratch from Italian wines. That's how I built. That's how I kickstarted my my taste buds. That's how I started teasing my taste buds, and my wine knowledge was mainly in Italian wine, because I could see the diversity of Portuguese varietals and diversity of different backgrounds. I could tell that Italian culture, Italian food in Italian would make a lot of sense with Portuguese food. That kind of Portuguese culture,
Mm.
that kind of Mediterranean feel made total sense, and I'm super grateful that I made that decision to jump into Italian wine and to understand like everything, instead of like going directly to the principles of French wine and everything. That was a second step. So it was not easy at that time, when Italian restaurants were huge in the city, that seeing someone with an accent that was a musician with dreadlocks was not easy. Like it was, I had to breathe a lot of times. I had to breathe a lot of times and just think like, this is what I want to do. And I need to spend as much time as my kid with my kid, and I want to do something that I started a career that I kind of stopped for a little bit coming from Portugal and coming over here and thinking about like my family at the time and with my kids. So I had to rethink a lot of times what I wanted to do. And
Hmm.
I'm so fortunate that I did that move on being going big in Italian wines, and that's what I'm doing right now. That was a big step for me, son.
Very good. And so, with that shift and that change, and where we're sitting now, what are you doing for yourself? I know you're recently down in California wine country, and what is the project you're working on now? Because I understand you're not yet back in the restaurant as you're trying to reimagine who Bruno is. Can you give us some insight?
So this was my second trip this year during the pandemic out of New York. I went to Portugal for judging some wines in May,
Oh, yes.
and then I came back, and then in last month I was invited by the Sonoma County wine growers, and basically the whole trip was like understanding like what harvest it's about to happen, like let's do some harvest, let's understand like the perspective of the grower. So it's pretty interesting to feel that sense of community,
Yeah.
mainly when you're living like about like 1 year and a half, closed in closed doors, like, and you're not talking with everyone. Everyone thinks like New York, like the city that never sleeps, but during the pandemic slept a lot.
Mm.
Like in that sense of community, like it was a little cold, let's say it. And once you get to the West Coast and you go to California, it was really interesting to have that warmth that despite like the hard times, and mainly them right now, that are like facing super challenging times on top of whatever it's going on, like they have serious times they're facing now. It was really interesting to come across with the wine growers understanding, like instead of like thinking about producers, like it's really important to understand like where they buy their fruit, like where, from which sides they're buying their fruit. And that's like, so I visited big names in Sonoma for wine growers, and I visited big, beautiful wineries as well. And that was a stunning point for me to realize that sense of community and how everyone is helping each other during these challenging times in California with the drought, with the fires, with labor, with sustainability. Like there's a lot of it, of course, with the pandemic. And then I spent some time, a couple of days, 2 or 3 days in Napa, and I noticed and I witnessed a different sense of community, more like the sun, like the aspiring winemakers, like assistant winemakers, people that left New York or left like Boston, Virginia, or Chicago, and now they're on the West Coast, like trying to make their own wine, but actually they're assisting winemakers at beautiful wineries and producers in Napa. And that sense of community, like, was like the warmth that I got, like in the split second, like you're staying with this guy, like, bah, 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 bah. Tomorrow you're going to this, you're going to that, bah, bah, bah. Like in half an hour, we're going to all meet, we're going to have drinks, but blah, blah, blah. But everyone was just so joyful. And I really appreciated like all the warmth that I got in Napa, and I got like a different kind of warmth in
Yeah.
Sonoma. It was very humbling and very something that I think about it every day.
That's kind of interesting. It seems like almost a another stage or step of, you're saying that you were in Lisboa and then moved to the country. You're kind of in New York and then sort of having that interesting
Totally.
country experience. I mean, distance, you're traveling many hours in a plane, but with a different vibe. And I'm not sure if that resonated with you.
Definitely does. That's why I
Yeah.
was bringing like the I went to Portugal actually before that, because there's that kind of, this, you've been in Europe many times, like there's kind of that Mediterranean feel that,
Yeah.
like, hey, Bruno's in town, like, hey, boom, 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 in half an hour, like everyone is just like together in the back patio in someone's bar, like, or someone's winery, or like you're just tasting some with someone in the vineyards and everything. That feel like really like touched to me. And I've been told, I've been warned about, like, you come to Napa, you come to California, like that's going to happen to you. And I knew this was about to happen. But just the whole vibe, like just like the way you wake up, and just the way you smell, like just like everything that it's around you, it's just like a very healing thing. And I'm truly blessed that that happened. I'm very thankful that both of these trips that I did this year, and I spent a lot of time on my own, something that I normally don't do when I go to Portugal. I'm always like with crews doing this, and this. And I decided, no, I'm not renting a car. You're going to pick me up. You're going to pick me up. You guys are all cousins. You guys all know each other. Like you're all quintas, you're all brothers, you're all cousins, you're all,
Yeah.
family. And so I did that. And I just wanted like to, like sit back, because we needed to think about all this moment that is happening with us, and how we can move on, how we can understand and recognize what's going on.
Yes, and so I totally understand that, and really empathize and reflect that same energy. And I'm doing the same thing here in Toronto, as I've been back at service and seeing how things are and seeing how things could be, and trying to find a way to navigate and move through this new normalcy, as though some people are really rushing to get back to what was the old normal. There's a bit of this resistance, which I think is completely necessary, and it looks like you're on that path and journey. I guess there's the one and two questions, the last questions like to ask. I know you haven't been back on the ground in the chambers of the restaurants. Um, can you give us some of the industry in Toronto, and who are watching this globally, a sense of what it's like being back in the restaurant in New York, um, or on the
Actually,
streets from your peers? Yeah, yeah,
actually, like it's actually pretty interesting. They're talking from Toronto, which is like the biggest Portuguese community in
yeah.
North America, I think in the whole world, actually.
Oh, really?
And they realize they know what I'm saying about this, like this community feel, like this Mediterranean feel, when you feel like home and everything. But one of the decisions that I decided like to start thinking what I want to do, like, was like the first 2 weeks of the pandemic. I just flew back. I just landed back from Portugal from an event that I used to do over there. And once I sat here and like everything was closed, like I did all these events with Barolo, with Bordeaux, like and all these people in the restaurant. We were busy like with all people, like everyone on top of each other, like everyone cheering glasses, like everything is fine. I'm gonna touch your glass, chin, 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 chin. And then 2 weeks, like, oh my God, like we were touching glasses, we were doing this and this and that. But I sat close to my lines, and I was looking at them like what I'm gonna do. Like, so I started this IG lives and all these conversations and all these chats that opened up the door, like to talk with people, not only in Portugal, but in Bordeaux, in Barolo, in Sonoma, and everything. And someone in Indonesia, someone in Alaska, someone in Russia, someone in Norway can be watching this, and we all started to connecting. And I think it was a beautiful feeling that we can talk about the Portuguese sparkling red that people never knew about,
Hmm.
and someone across the globe is like, huh, never knew that, let me try, let me order. Like, but so like it was a very great moment that kickstarted what I'm doing now. But the decision that I'm making, that I decided to make during that transition, of like thinking like perhaps I want to do things more on my own, should I go back to restaurants, I already have the feeling that some were already like kind of in an endangered species, were
Yeah.
like already like, like minimum wage, like hourly wage in New York, like raised a lot. Like some started, like the team started like to be like trimmed down. Like let's face it, like restaurants were already like in a weird position before the pandemic. I have no problem with saying this, but hospitality and restaurants needed a little wake up call. And it's unfortunate like what's happening, but we all knew, we've been seasoned for a long time, we knew this, like this was a matter of time. It's been very fragile.
Yes.
It's been very of a gray area in hospitality, in many fronts, racial, uh, women's rights in hospitality, equality, diversity has been. So I'm fairly glad that this shake happened in hospitality. But let's face it, this was about to happen and it needed to happen, but took a long time. at least for my New York experience, like it was taking a lot of time to understand like all these things. So I've been a little bit on the back. I've been consulting. I've been working with restaurants. I've been doing my thing, like as you're doing like a lot of Zooms, a lot of education through Zoom. Of course, my Instagram lives, and doing a lot of staff training for restaurants for like distribution and everything. But I just see myself like at this stage that I would rather like do more of that education part. That's how I feel I'm the best of what I do. And I just feel like the community needs different voices too. And I feel like I can have my input. I can share what I know with people across the globe. Across the globe, beautiful. I think that's really humbling for me that I can do that online. That I can be talking with you. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this. Let's
That's
face it.
that's it.
Talking with producers in Portugal that I know them enough that they would never put themselves in front of a computer, in front of a camera, and now they're doing it. So I'll take that as a positive. There's few positives during these challenging times, and this is one of them. That we sharing the word of wine, like how we say this, how we say that. You were mentioning to me before, like did you rather talk like this instead of like this square box of like sharing knowledge of wine or interpretation of the word of wine. So that's something that I try my best every day, like instead of like thinking the way that I was thinking, like perhaps 3 years ago when I was approaching by, bringing this bottle to a table. Now I'm thinking a bit differently, like, because I'm learning with like a lot of voices. And I think that's the beauty of it, that we need to keep continuously thinking that it's a long road. Like it's not a marathon, not even a marathon. Like, like it's, you know,
It's
so
it's it's work, and I appreciate everything you've said there because I think it's true. And I agree with the idea of the shakeup, a readdressing of things, and then this room and space now that we've seen with new voices in the U.S. and the as you said, melanated faces. And it's happening in Toronto and in this part or this corner of North America for us as well. So that's amazing, and it resonates with me, and that's sort of part of my journey. And again, we wouldn't have seen each other if it weren't for a Zoom conference over the Van Zeller wines. This time last year, no, it was summer of
yeah,
last year, where
summer
we
of
connected and asking questions. So the last question I'd like to ask in terms of part of the broad strokes concept and the human element. And I know I sent you this question before. So, what is the one moment? I'm with you, visiting you in New York, or in Portugal in Buchelas. I've been there, beautiful, for sparkling wines with Arinto, as you mentioned. Whether it's in Lisboa, Buchelas, or in New York, what is the path to what is the one thing that is you that you love doing? Is it on the way to a cafe, a bodega, before service, or I guess now in your meditation of your life, what is the one walk, journey, cafe that you like to spend time in that kind of centers you, you meditate on? I know we could say, what is your favorite podcast, what music you're listening to, but I want us to paint a picture of like the walk. You're in New Jersey. Is there a space that you go to once a day, twice a day, 3 times a week? Or is it what is it?
No, actually, to be honest to you, like not necessarily. Like like one of the things that a lot of people like, oh man, I never seen you on trips like all these years. Like no, because I've always been like a one man job. Like in the past 4 or 5 years, what I was doing, I would be like doing inventory right now. I would be ordering right now. I'll be doing like so much things during the course of the day. Being the som, if I had to bartend, I would bartend and close the restaurant. So a lot of times I didn't necessarily went out like after service or go like to some place. But one thing that I always like to do, and it's something that I always pace myself with, like after service, if there's a chance to play some pool, like or some darts or sing karaoke, understand your chef perspective and texture and acidity and the vinaigrette, or going out with your busser and understand like why he likes hoppy beers, and all of a sudden like he's asking you like, I would like to be in a wine team, because it just opened that conversation. I like that. I learned a lot with the people that work with me, and that's one of my things with me. Like I like to do that, but one of the real things that I like to do is just to walk after service and take a big walk in New York if the weather allows and everything. I like just to walk and put my phones on and just like breathe and just either like and try to have a grip of what happened, either bad or good, instead of bringing that same kind of stress home. Because easily, I think this is a little bit of, let's say, like an elephant in the room in hospitality, that we want to bring an experience to people all the time. And at the end of the day, I think we forget about ourselves, that we are always like serving and making people happy. And I think we forget about ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's something that I always like tried like to think like, I don't want to bring any stress over like busy day or like something went wrong or, so I always like to walk. And that's something that I've been doing during the pandemic, is doing like late night walks, like, like 11 o'clock, like I just walk like for half an hour, 40 minutes. I just walk in the neighborhood. There's a park, like I walk and I walk and I walk. And I come home and I decided to do like bubble baths too, open some bubbles and like soak in the tub, watch like Netflix and or read a book. Of course, it's going to be most likely wine. But that's something that it really helped me during the pandemic, was like soaking in the tub. Could be in a Negroni in Manhattan, just Netflix and watching great shows. And because I think a lot of times we in hospitality, we forget to think like, we forget about ourselves.
Yeah.
And a lot of times things can easily go wrong. Let's face it, that I think times are better, but there was a time, I think you might remember this, like in the 2000s, there was a time that restaurants were struggling how staff could deal with stress. A lot of people that I know like went the wrong way, how they dealt with stress. Either they left to the hospitality, or actually they started with addictions and this and this and that, because it's not easy. Hospitality is not easy. I love it, but let's face it, it's not. It's a very challenging industry, and mainly right now it's very challenging.
Yes, we miss the wellness aspect, the meditation and the centering of what we do, and we're like active psychotherapists and sponges for
And
emotions.
if we were in Portugal, I would definitely bring you to a beach, close to a beach, like have a few beers, or have some beautiful white wine close to the coast, because easily Lisbon, it's close to the beach, like in 20 minutes you're close to the beach. In Porto, like you're like, so that's something that I really like. And I as much as possible, I have that kind of ritual with me when I land. If I have like a few hours, like I go like close to the beach, like, and I have a few I have a few beers, like we call it imperial, like some draft beer and some lupini beans, the termosses and everything, or some snails and everything, and just chill and just get that breeze. And like it's something that hopefully we manage a trip or something like that, and I'll take you to that feeling that totally resonated when I was in the West Coast, that coastal feeling, that kind of warmth, that it's super cool here.
Amazing. So we'll leave it at that with these feelings and of meditation and walk or the beach when we can get there. This has been a great pleasure to speak with you, Bruno. Thank you for your time. And I think yeah, man, always. And we'll wrap it up here. And thank you all for watching and listening and taking the time to understand Bruno Almeida out in New York, i.e. New Jersey, sommelier and wine educator. And we'll see you next time. And thank you, man. This has been great.
Thank you, man. I'll see you soon.
Indeed.
Keep it going. Keep crushing it, man.
Indeed.
Thank you so much for everything. Thank
Peace.
you, man. Thank you.
Bye.